Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. All right. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Liren, and I'm the marketing manager for MS Global, which is the leading provider for cryptocurrency exchange in Malaysia. Today, we have three honorary guests here. Okay. Firstly, we have Dato Fadzli. He's the CEO of MS Global, a fully licensed digital asset exchange under the Security Commission, Malaysia, and also the fourth one that received the license. All right. And also, we have the amazing duo, MJ and John, who are the co-founders of FIRL. Like, both of them actually have extensive knowledge in finance stocks over the years. And they actually facilitate many of companies' intensive education course and personally train more than 1,000 students over the years and help them achieve financing independence and wealth. So all three guests today will be diving deeper into what are cryptocurrency, what problem does cryptocurrency solve, and also how does blockchain work in this webinar. All right. So before we get started, if you have any question during the webinar, please type them below and we will bring them up during the session. Okay, without further ado, I'll pass the stage to MJ right here. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Liren. Thank you so much, Sifu and MX Global, for organizing this and giving us the privilege to host and to really discuss about what we think is exciting and some of the challenges in crypto as well in this few series. Before I begin, Dato and John, I know it's been pretty busy for both of you, but I just want to check in on how are you guys doing?
Dato, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, guys. Thanks, MJ, and thanks, John. Yeah, I guess everyone's just heads down and trying to execute, right? But other than that, just caught a bit of a flu. Thank God, negative.
No.
Negative.
Oh, no.
So yeah.
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny now. Like when you say positive and negative, people immediately know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Times have changed. Times have changed. That's really true.
But I think congratulatory tones are in order, MJ, for Dato Fadzli and his
Oh
team.
yeah, 100%. Yes.
The stake from Binance, I think it's a great boost of confidence to you guys. Congratulations on being the fourth as well, but also the one that has a global exchange that have. Are you excited actually with when Binance took that stake with you guys?
Yeah, I gotta say, like, not to say that we didn't think it was gonna happen, but we knew it was gonna be an uphill battle, kind of negotiating. Even the largest player, largest incumbent or existing player in Malaysia, kind of in comparison. So if you look at like the daily volume, you add 2, 3, 4 finances, liquidity, right? So obviously, we're like super thrilled, to be able to work out a partnership that makes sense. But yeah, we're super excited. Yeah.
Yes, definitely more than that. Now, speaking of thrilling, right? I think one thing we all of us have in common is that we're all quite thrilled and excited about just crypto in general, and it's really good that MX Global is part of the spearhead in the Malaysian scene and maybe beyond to bring crypto adoption to the next level. But I'd like to actually start off with a personal story from each of you, right? And maybe starting with Dato. What is your story with crypto? When was the first time you buy it? What did you feel like buying it? And like, what convinced you to hop on this very volatile, exciting, very uncertain, but certainly thrilling train?
Oh, sorry, I still had the mute on.
Yes.
Yeah, so actually, I don't claim to be like one of the super early adopters, in crypto. I was actually quite skeptical, and I'm still skeptical of certain parts of the cryptocurrency scene for a long time. It's only in the last few years, like since 2016, when I've been reading up on blockchain and what blockchain can do, right? So I'm actually primarily excited about blockchain itself. And so, I think you read about kind of the genesis or the like how Bitcoin came about, right? Because of the kind of global crash and like a huge distrust in the monetary system. I always had my doubts about that kind of thesis because at the end of the day, just as much as kind of like the big banks on Wall Street were too big to fail and they always got built out and built out and built out again by governments, I kind of thought, this is a scenario that a lot of the stakeholders they can ultimately determine like the parameters of the situation, right? They can always, I would argue, like artificially correct it. So for me, it was only when Ethereum came out with this concept of smart contracts. So then I thought, wow, that's basically like USB open source. And then, and you know, if you look back, that's kind of like where computer hardware and like internet information sharing kind of had a huge inflection point, right? Like when things were user generated, when users can basically design like how things are supposed to work. So and I think like once they started, you know, announcing all the different ERC this and ERC that, it got really interesting. One of the things that I kind of saw and I was still skeptical about is like a lot of beta testing is still happening. You know, like, you know, it's not like kind of building other tech startups. You know, you beta test in a small group. In crypto, like the beta test is public, right? You know,
That's true.
You have obviously the testnet approach, yes, but essentially when it goes to mainnet, it's not like a stress tested system, right? So some of the stories I think are a bit alarming, and of course, most recently when you see about how the couple got away with the hack, and then that's where I kind of thought, well, that is bad, but in which other financial system could a regulator or investigative like agency just sit and watch this account forever, and one day when something moves, you know, that gives you a hint. So all of these benefits, I think, it's not because it's crypto, it's because there's blockchain behind it, right? So
Yes.
So for me, it was that, and of course, before I started investing in 2016. So at that time, I kind of thought, you know, maybe hopefully I can make like 10-15% on like Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you know, I just left it and forgot about it. Honestly, I opened a couple of exchange accounts. I bought, you know, like 1,000 ringgit worth here, 2,000 ringgit worth there. I kind of thought, hey, if it goes up, maybe I buy myself a new MacBook. Right?
Pocket money.
5 years later, open it and we're like, wow, I can. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking. I was thinking the other day, wow, the Mac Studio looks pretty good, right? Like,
that's a good one. So, like, I'm gonna throw this question before I move on to John's story, right? Was Ethereum the first one that you buy, since you sound more excited about it, or you start like most of us with Bitcoin?
I did park a little bit in Bitcoin, but my first portfolio, Ethereum, was still, you know, I mean, of course, relative, right? In terms of like nominal value or absolute numbers, it was way cheaper than Bitcoin. So I just kind of bought a lot more Ethereum or Ether. And then, as you know, like some of the layer twos then came up over the last few years. And then just swapped from Ether to some of those projects. And some of them are really, really cool, you know,
Yeah, I mean, we start talking about layer twos. I think that's quite advanced, really. So, you know, we'll maybe talk a little bit about that in our next session, where we maybe
next session,
yes,
definitely.
Yeah, something to look forward to the listeners coming for the next session. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So, John, what's your brief story? Then we can talk a little bit more about blockchain.
Yeah, I actually want a supplementary question to Dato first.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, among your peer group, right, when you were getting into it, did many people look at you as crazy, or were you a late starter in your peer group? And I'm going to ask the same for, besides your peer group, comparatively to maybe your uncles and aunties, those like probably one generation above. And when they, I'm pretty sure you told them a little bit of stories of how you got started and all that. I just want to see what was the reaction in your circle, among your peer groups, and also among those that are slightly older, actually.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an unfair comparison. Like I've been in tech like pretty much my whole life, the last 20 years. So almost everyone, like as you say, in my peer group, or like, you know, the 5 people closest to me kind of thing, like they were also investing in crypto. To be honest, I was probably one of the later ones, right?
I see.
Like, bro, you know, you could do this. Like this is before like staking, before all sorts of stuff you can do with crypto. Like, oh, you need to get into this early. And I was like, no, I'll invest in for equity in startups, and that one I understand. This crypto one I have no idea where it's going. But like, I think one generation above me, I do try to explain it, and they still don't understand what it is, right?
I see.
So I find that the way you sell the story, or like explain the story of what is a Bitcoin or what is Ethereum, it's very it depends on, yes, as you say, like which generation they're from, right? Malaysia, I think, you know, a lot of people discount the fact that when you're 12 in Malaysia, it's kind of normal for your parents to go to the bank and open a an account for you, right? That's
Yep.
not normal in some other markets in Southeast Asia. So the trust in the banking system here is very, very strong. It's almost like by default
That's a very
that's
good
where
point.
you should put your money. I used to invest in companies in Indonesia for a long time, and I used to think it was a joke, but people there seriously like store their money under their mattress,
Pillows.
right? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that's a real thing. There's like the frame, and then there's a hole in there, and then they literally that's their savings account, right? So I think we start from a different understanding and perception, and definitely I would agree that the slightly older generation feel that a bank is where you put money, and the money should grow in a savings account, or later you look into kind of like some of the like FDs, and of course in Malaysia we're also kind of spoiled, right? Like you have ASB and all this. So
Precisely.
pretty difficult to find those kind of very competitive products in other countries. So different predispositions, I would think.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, actually. Never thought about it that way. But Malaysians do really trust their bank, even if they've not upgraded it's the same staff, it's the same bank teller, it's the same chair that they wait, it's the same sound when they take the number, but they still go back, right? I think that's a very good point. So maybe just a quick one, John. How do you get into it?
I think I read about it early because I've always been interested in tech, so I didn't know Dato was very into tech. So I, as an engineer, is always interested into tech, reading into all this. But I think at that point of time, when it was at the nascent stage, when I said nascent 2009, I started reading about it probably 2012. I think there was no very clear guidelines on actually how to get in, or how to, what we call, there's a term for it, on-ramp. It's like, okay, you hear this concept, you hear about blockchain, you heard about the ledger system, double entry, but okay, so how do you apply it, you see? So, and that's where I guess I only really bought into my first crypto when I was, I think in 2016, so probably similar time. And, at that point of time, it's like, okay, this is something that you don't trust like a bank, and I love equity, something tangible. But I put in a very small amount. And I think it was more the intrigue and the curiosity of how can this actually manifest itself, has a utility value. Because what really intrigued me was this, looking at Bitcoin and how it was conceptualized. Right? You need to understand game theory. You need to understand accounting. You need to understand computer science, encryption. So I'm a big Da Vinci fan. So when I hear this, okay, sign me up, kind of thing. Whether it makes money or not, maybe, right? Maybe, yeah. So that was my story. Okay, MJ, back to you.
Good. Okay, look, there's really a lot.
Hey, MJ, but what about you? How did you get into crypto?
Yeah, how did you get?
So I was actually, when I started, to be fair, I mean, among three of us, I have the shortest time in terms of investing experience. I would say generally speaking, my investing experience began maybe somewhere in 2014, 2015. And, most newbie investors, they come across the prospect of investing in gold, right? And it's very attractive, right? Because, the whole, what Dato mentioned earlier on about the financial system collapsing, I mean, that's what people say, and money printing and all that. So I always believe in the money printing story. I always believe in the idea that all these incumbent financial institutions abuse their, power because they basically too big to fail, right? And once you're in that position, you can do whatever you want. And so the natural inclination then is to, okay, what is the remedy to this? Let's look at gold. That was when I did more research, though, this concept of digital gold and how is it like gold? Well, because, there's 21 million of it ever going to be minted all the way until 2080, I believe, somewhere there. So then I was like, hey, that's really intriguing. But, just like John, how do I even buy it? Right. And the way to buy it, there was no MX Global back in the day, right? The way to buy it is, through this dodgy, P2P, and they would take a fat card and, they will buy
the website look very scammy one, right? You go and look at the website, it looks like someone just scrapped together some HTML code and just paste it there, kind of thing.
Yeah, and so how can I trust that? And then in 2018, after when crypto winter started, right? When Ethereum was about 100, Bitcoin was maybe 6,000-7,000 somewhere there. That's when I started going into crypto a little bit more. Of course, looking back now, I should have put more lah. Okay. So, but in hindsight, everyone is rich, right? So now, in terms of the future, right, where I think the story of crypto is quite well developed, but for some reason, based on my research, there's only maybe 10 million users worldwide, and that's inclusive of decentralized finance. So don't talk about the guys in the centralized. It's not including decentralized and centralized, right? There's maybe only 10 million very active users and 200 million wallets. We have 7 to 8 billion people. So there's a lot of ways to go, right? But I like to get both of your thoughts on what is the future for crypto, because some people are saying, for example, yeah, Bitcoin was great, right? It's up 1,000,000% from 2011 or whenever it was. But will the next 10 years look the same? Maybe Dato, you want to give it a go?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? If you look at kind of, you made a great point about the adoption rate. Yeah, globally it's still very low. In a recent Finder survey, they found that Malaysia and Nigeria were amongst the highest adoption. But obviously there's a lot of double counting here, right? And typically, if you're Malaysian, you probably have more than a couple. Yeah, exactly. So, but still, I mean, because the methodology is similar, like across other countries that they did, I think Malaysia came up at about 17 or 18%, right? And so we're amongst the highest, and we know from some of our partners that we're talking about, it's some of the like the portfolio size of a typical Malaysian is quite high. So I think Malaysians are quite interested and quite excited about the prospect of crypto. Where is it going to go from here? I think Gary Vee said it best, right? Like there's this one video where I think he put up on TikTok or something. And by the way, TikTok and Twitter are like like where the majority of most of my staff are learning stuff about crypto. He said, like, if you look at the NFT space, less than 1% of the world has ever even heard the term NFT, right? So even less than 1% have bought an NFT. Even less than 1%, even lesser than that, have traded an NFT. So the only direction you can go is up. So I believe that assuming that the projects are legitimate, and then even if they're trying to solve something really, really difficult, it can only get better, right? And I believe, like, personally for me and my investment strategy, like I'm a long-term holder for most of these projects, right? And I agree with what John said. Sometimes you go to the sites, it looks super scammy, but of course today, if you go to some of the big projects, the sites look amazing, right? But in the early days, most of the websites, I believe even Ethereum's first site, they're just trying to get something up so that people, hey, read about what we are. So I think there are some sites which are like that, but there are also lots of sites which, even now, I would argue that they look even better than some exchanges. And we had that experience, right? When we started off MX in August, we started onboarding people. Like, obviously we're trying to get users to come on board, and I have people that I know, acquaintances, and say, hey, I've got 7 Bitcoins. I want to bring it over to MX, and you open that site and there's nothing. There's no wallet. It's literally just like a HTML, and then it just shows him that he's got 7 Bitcoins. You can't do anything with it. You click withdraw. Nothing happens, right? There's no, and you can see the API calls. They're not calling anything. So I think that's, I don't want to put a self-plug here, but like that's why you want to go with a regulated DEX. Any of the regulated DEX. Obviously, we'd be thrilled if you come with MX, but we can't do that, right? Like legally, we can't do that to you. We get into a lot of trouble for doing something like that. But it's prevalent in Malaysia. I believe one of the biggest scams fleeced sometimes 600 to 800 million US dollars from essentially retail investors in Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam, right? They were huge, It came out in the papers and everything in Malaysia. But to me, like, I kind of look at the glass half full, right? Like that means there are a lot of people who want to get into this. And yeah, sure, maybe they've been burnt, but hopefully that they wanna keep going, and then they'll continue investing. But yes, short answer to that, MJ, is that I think the only way is up, right? So a lot of the projects will, I think, in the long term, grow. I don't think all the projects will grow like how they envision it. I would argue like Ethereum never saw this coming, right? Like the kind of ecosystem of Ethereum you have today. I don't think that's what Vitalik thought was going to happen. And I think the inherent properties or characteristics of Ethereum kind of give that away. Like, obviously people always complain like the TPS, or like, how many transactions they can do per second is very, very slow. Yeah, maybe because he never thought there's going to be this many, this much use of the Ethereum network. So I think in many ways it's going to go up, and people are just going to have to solve problems as they go. But I believe that the developer community behind this are super passionate, right? And then
yes.
So I think they'll get there, and we're happy to be along for the ride with some of them. Yeah.
So that's what I have to ask, because you mentioned NFTs. Will MX Global have an NFT trading platform or a place for people to put their projects so people can mint? I have to ask.
OpenSea Malaysian version.
I'm not sure. Laut terbuka. I'm not sure if you want to. Technically, I'm not sure whether we want to go into the OpenSea kind of model, right? For MX, building a regulated exchange is already pretty hard, because you're always on the back foot compared to the unregulated players, right? They can do 100 things, you can only do 5, for example, right?
Yeah.
Or rather, today we can only list 2, they can have thousands of tokens. So you always have these trade-offs. But I believe that within that, we can create like some significant value, which is that if you look at the license, essentially what it means is that we can deal in crypto and ringgit, and nobody else technically should be able to, right? So maybe we wouldn't host our own, quote unquote OpenSea, but there are loads of guys building amazing NFT marketplaces, and I would anticipate that they would never be able to accept ringgit. Okay, so if we could do like an NFT tab on MX, and the content came from some of these other marketplaces, right? And essentially, it could be very seamless. Like you would see the price reflect in ringgit equivalent, and if it was Ethereum or if it was a Matic or Polygon-based one, you click that, and then basically it would just do that from your MX ringgit account. It would get you that amount of crypto, whatever you need. It would then send over, execute a contract. I think that would be a cool thing to do. And then they'd be highly defensible and value add from our side. And I think the other marketplaces obviously then get access to something that they may not be able to do on their own. So that's the way we're kind of thinking about some of these opportunities, right? We really don't want to kill off, quote unquote, the competition. I think there's ways that we can work with a lot of them, primarily because of the regulations, and I think we can get further if we do it together. And at the end of the day, like hiring is like super hard, guys. I think you guys know too, right? Like you run FIRL, and then we'd rather work with guys who are super enthusiastic about it rather than like hire 3-4 more staff and then tell them, hey, why don't you go and build this NFT thing for us, right? So yeah, I think partnerships are the way to go.
All right.
Super. Great, man.
Yeah. Like, look, we're so excited, right? Like, we're just waiting for this, waiting for that additional new tab, so we can click.
Buka laut. Buka tirai first.
Laut
tirai, buka laut.
Laut terbuka, John. Laut terbuka. So, John, maybe, Dato touched a lot about the adoption point of view and why, from that perspective, he's excited about crypto. But what other aspects of crypto do you think is exciting and has, let's call it, upward pressure for its price?
Yeah, I think I'll come from how would I say a problems perspective that many typical Malaysians will go through, and I think one of the reasons why we're hosting this series is not so much just for telling people about crypto exchanges, but also kind of like educating them about the ecosystem, kind of educating them about the problems crypto is trying to solve, kind of getting them ready or prepared, because I'm just trying to imagine for the listeners out there who probably are not too familiar with computers, right? Try getting them started on a DeFi wallet. Oh my God! I think just tie a belt around your neck and then you try to strangle yourself. I'll come from a problems perspective and to your question, MJ. So one of the things I used to do as an investor was actually invest in properties, and I always like to use this example to look at the blockchain and to look at Ethereum smart contracts on the problems they can solve. So just imagine in a property transaction, you have multiple parties that are exchanging either a legal document, either a custodial ownership of a certain title or whatsoever. And the beauty about a ledger system, immutable trail, is that you don't get things like I'm pretty sure certain listeners out there who have invested in properties before have heard of things like, oh, the bank lost my title, or the bank lost my S&P, or the bank lost this, or the land title was not caveated or whatever, right? So I think I'm pretty excited about what the blockchain technology can actually solve in alleviating this. That's one. The other example I like to use is actually in terms of very simple things like logistics. So I was explaining to I think a few. I don't know whether I've even shared this with you, MJ. There was a time. There's a point in time when I was in charge of a particular construction yard. We actually have 6x8 boxes go missing in the yard because the yard is very big. It's a construction yard. It's very big. And it never fails to amaze me that $1 million or even $100 million equipments get exchanged on pieces of paper. There's no barcode. Don't talk about barcode system. Don't even talk about all that, right? So just imagine if custom clearance. I'm pretty sure that if you do other trading work or just to ship a piece of paper or to some equipment over to Malaysia, you go through all these different forms, different all this, right? That is what gets me excited. When you hear companies like Maersk, people like logistic players adopting blockchain technology and smart contracts to ensure that there's a standardization way of tracking this. That is what really gets me excited. Because while it's not good for the labor market because it reduces a lot of middlemen, but two, it forces the labor market to upskill themselves to do better things. That's where I'm excited.
Yeah, that's a good point now.
Yeah.
Maybe we have too many accountants. We don't know, right? But jokes aside, John, you mentioned, and Dato as well, this very buzzword has been in crypto one of the biggest buzzwords, really, which is blockchain. Now, John, when you mention all those real life applications about blockchain, what some people interpret. So, I'm a believer in crypto. I assume Dato also a massive believer in crypto. When we hear that, we are like, see, that's why crypto is going to be good. But there are groups of people out there who hear what you say and say, John, you make a lot of sense. Yes, blockchain is good, but crypto, now that's bad. Crypto good, Bitcoin is bad, right? Bill Gates said that, right? I think Bitcoin is just Bitcoin and all the other coins, Ethereum, whatnot, just a bunch of speculative tools. But we can do magic with blockchain technology. So Dato, I'm not sure if you've heard this, let's call it argument or this criticism of crypto before. And if you have, how would you respond to this?
Yeah, I think it's a very academic approach to this, right? Because blockchain always sounds like it can do good things, and of course, you want to believe that all technologies can end up doing good things or used for good. But actually, if you take a step back and you look at like some of the other transformational technologies, they didn't really do useful things in the beginning, right? Which is why I think I love how what MJ brought up with NFTs. NFTs in the crypto space are like NFTs obviously are not a crypto, right? So you use cryptocurrencies to affect the smart contracts that basically generate these NFTs, and they're not just pictures or anything. It's basically like a digital ledger, a receipt of like who owns what, and I think that leads to what John was saying, which is when you do all of the shipment tracking, right, like traceability, track and trace. Yeah, if you're sitting like in Harvard or like in Oxford, you think, yeah, that's what the world should do, right? We should track everything because then everybody will know provenance. Provenance is one of the holy grails of blockchain. But the truth is, you look at like, for example, online video streaming, right? People didn't use it for Udemy in the beginning to go and teach everyone, useful things. You used it for YouTube, right? Just entertainment. So I think that's where NFTs are similar, which is like it's being used for a lot of entertainment. And of course, there's a sub segment of entertainment, that probably reserved for a less PC kind of audience, and that blows up first, right? So I think if you look at those kind of trends, a lot of useful technology are not used in very useful ways in the beginning. But I tend to think that that's important for the adoption because it gets more and more and more people using it in some way, shape, or form, right? The fact that you would binge through hours of YouTube is also one of the reasons why you don't mind sitting through a 2-hour Udemy course and learning something online, right? You can't bank on the pandemic to go and teach us all to do online meetings lah. So So I believe, yeah, blockchain should always be used for good. But will it always, well, not to say for good, but for useful things, But would it be used for useful things in the beginning? I don't believe so. Like, I don't think many of the technologies have ever been used for useful things from the get-go. We'll get there, but there is a process to which you have to get people interested and involved. And yeah, let's face it, I think like when you talk about Musk or anything, like it is not a small investment for them, right? It's not like they say, hey, let's go into blockchain, let's flip the switch and we start tagging everything, right? It is a huge investment. So you can imagine like the amount of convincing you need at every level of that kind of organization for them to buy into it. It may not come from the fact that they've traced a puzzle, it may come from the fact that like a whole bunch of them have bought apes and understand how the transfer of that ownership has gone from one person to another, and maybe that's how it starts, So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done, and blockchain should always could always end up with useful things, but I don't think we should take it as a given that it'll always start off as useful. I think a lot of entertainment plays a heavy hand at like kind of market awareness and adoption and education.
Yeah.
I just have a follow-up, sorry for
Yeah.
Dato, right,
Yeah,
on this.
no worries.
So I think you make a really good point about how a lot of the early usage of things can be quite, to put it bluntly, useless. But I think some people are saying that even the so-called proven or some of the more well-known assets on usage of blockchain, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, these guys can go away, right? What are your thoughts about that? I can understand the point about these new technologies booming and busting, but do you think that will you put Bitcoin and Ethereum in the same category?
In terms of dominance, yes, right. It's pretty hard to ignore like how much of the daily traded global volume it comes from Bitcoin and Ethereum being traded, right? I think combined they make up for something like more than 60 or 70%
That's right.
on any given day. So if the way that I tend to think of cryptocurrencies is, because a lot of people ask, what's the inherent value of a Bitcoin? What's the underlying asset? What is the gold equivalent? Well, I mean, I don't want to get into this argument of like, there's no gold backing fiat. That's a separate argument. But for me, after so many years of kind of looking at this space, what I've come to understand is the main value is the network effect. How many people are using it? And it's not that easy to convince, a million people, hey, buy this coin, so because the network effects are so strong on Ethereum and Bitcoin, I don't think they'll be going away for a very long time. Does it mean that they'll always be the number one and number two? And of course, that there's this chat of what they call the flipping, right? When Ethereum might take over Bitcoin in terms of the of dominance, or like how much trading volume is done. Yeah, maybe that could happen. I think if you take a longer term view, like 20 years, there's no guarantee that Bitcoin and Ethereum will be the top, but I think they'll be around, right? For me, I think the network effect of what I call some of these blue chips is pretty difficult to replace. Maybe one day we're gonna have like somebody else is gonna have a call like this, and they say, I wasn't sure about that crypto, right? That's why I kind of thought Bitcoin. I should buy Bitcoin. That's a safe one. Like how MJ said just now about buying gold, right? There's nothing actually inherent about gold that makes it such a safe investment instrument. It's all because of like societal perception and obviously systems that have been designed around gold. Similarly, I think in 20 years, a lot of systems would have been designed to cater for Bitcoin. And I totally see that in most markets, when they start regulating, Bitcoin is like the easy one for regulators to say, yeah, we should allow people to buy Bitcoin. Why? Because it's like the biggest one. And so as those things happen, one day I think Bitcoin will become like, the quintessentially like the same way we talk about gold today. It's the safe one,
Something old people buy, right?
Yeah. when we're old people, like
Yeah.
I got two kids, like 9 and 6. Right? I have a third one, but he's way too young to understand any of these things. And yeah, like I think like most kids, but actually my kids are my gauge for where I think crypto is gonna go. My son wanted to make an NFT. Understanding, he didn't care that it's on Ethereum or he doesn't care about all those things. All he cares about like I make this thing, I do it on a blockchain, and the way he said it was like that, like I can you help me make this NFT on a blockchain? He didn't care which blockchain, right? And he says somebody to be able to buy for me for $5. So he has no idea how much an Ethereum is, right? Or an Ether is. But so I think moving forward, the market will become more and more agnostic about what the underlying blockchain technology is. They just want to get what they want done. You know what I mean?
Precisely.
Nobody ever asks what's the kind of technology behind YouTube or WhatsApp
That's
message.
true.
They just like, I want to watch that video and I want to send this message. It works. I'm happy with that. And I think today we're at the stage in cryptocurrencies like IRC in the 90s, right? You kind of need to know what you're doing. You need to know like which nets to connect to, and then /J hashtag teen, right? Teen channels. Then
You need which telnet channel, which particular port,
exactly.
right?
And then when you're in it, then you learn the lingo, you learn the
ASL.
the ASL,
the
exactly,
lingo,
right?
ASL.
You learn all of that, and then you also, as you go along, you learn that you need to do nick serve, chan serve, to start to get your nickname, chan serve, and those things are not easy,
Yeah.
And you never knew whether you could make a mistake and go back on it and everything. Like, I think crypto is there now, but eventually there's going to be, if that was IRC, I believe there's going to be an ICQ, and later an ICQ is going to become like a messenger, and one day it's a WhatsApp. So eventually you're doing the same thing, but it's just more and more efficient and user friendly. And yeah, maybe one day you don't have to think so hard about where you're going to get a good price for Bitcoin. There'll be a Sky Scanner or like an Agoda type thing for Bitcoin. You'll find the cheapest one. You click that, like, as long as you get it, right? So
that's right.
I think things will move towards that way where humans or like societies have already been conditioned and have this expectation that things should be very easy to use and very intuitive. So cryptocurrencies or like the platforms for cryptos right now are not very intuitive. And people get very nervous. I mean, I bet you guys, when you withdrew some of your Bitcoin and Ethereum, I bet you like the first few times you're so nervous, like, what is happening with this thing? Is it ever going to land in the other one? You look at the wallet address and you check whether you spell everything. Yeah,
refresh,
right.
refresh.
And I don't think that's great, right? Like, the mass market is not going to accept that. So I think there's huge opportunities for a lot of the services to kind of like innovate in that and make it closer to the mass user like expectation.
For those listening, I think John and I, we started. I'm sure Dato can relate as well. We were transferring Bitcoin. Took like 1 hour. Like, it's just remember the good old days, which is like 4 years ago only. Right, 1 hour to transform, and then like Ethereum is just 15 minutes or 6 minutes, whatever it is. But I know. So John, I know.
It was to your point, MJ. You like, okay, is it in? Is it in?
Yeah, exactly. So I think a lot of the guys who are listening, some of these jokes are lost on you, which is why I would always advise people, like, even if you didn't really need to withdraw, you should just try it, because to lessen that nervousness in yourself is super important, right? What I realized with my friends who started, withdrawing some money or depositing some money to or cryptos into MX, right? They got very nervous, and then I asked them, well, why don't you feel like that with a bank transfer? And many people discount this, right? Today, we don't feel like that because there's instant transfer. There's Do It Now, which is pretty much real time. But that has not been around for that long. You know what I mean?
No, it wasn't. Actually, it's most recent only, I mean, I grew up in a day when it's IBG. IBG means you get it only 1 day later, right?
Yeah. So that's why I told my friend, I say, hey, that's because you think everything's instant transfer. But especially if you're in a company, right? Like, there's not much, not all banks allow you instant transfer. You do IBG. And like, one of my staff made a claim the other day, and we transferred it, and then they got nervous, and they're like, oh, how come the money's not in yet? Because we did it after 5, so you're gonna get it the next day before 11 in the morning. And that nervousness is the same thing that they feel with crypto, but there is no customer service person to call. There's no number from the bank that you can call, because the lady's not actually gonna make it faster, right? She's just gonna tell you, she's gonna explain to you, okay, since it's after 5, you'll receive it tomorrow after 11. She cannot do anything to make it faster.
That's right.
And that's one of the things that we concentrated on in MX, right? We realized that a lot of our users are going to get nervous for different things. And so we have this number, and they call, and half the time just explaining what is happening calms them down, and then they're like, okay, because that's not available on every platform. And I think that's why people go to Reddit and all that, start asking questions, because they have nobody else to turn to.
Definitely no such thing in DeFi, 100%.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
So, John,
no
I know you had
helpline.
John, I know you had a question. I had to cut you off just now.
Oh no, it wasn't a question. It was actually a segue, because with what Dato was mentioning about. So back to your original question, which was
blockchain
crypto. Good, crypto
Correct.
bad. Right?
Yes.
I think the point I wanted to make was I wanted to add into what Dato said and segue into my point, which was a lot of people think that technology comes for free, or they take for granted technology comes for free. So Dato made a point about MERS, right? Right. For MERS to be able to pour so much capex cost research and development, they already have a business generating revenue, generating income to be able to support that. Now, just imagine a particular crypto ecosystem that does not yet have a network effect. When we say a network effect, if for those of you who are not familiar with crypto, you think of your Boost Pays, your Grab Pays in the early days when not many people are adopting. It was burning money for this kind of company. So I think when people say that blockchain is good, crypto is bad, I think they're missing the point that it has to be self-sustaining. There has to be an economic incentive. And that's where I think blockchain and crypto are joined at the hip. And a lot of people look at it purely from an academia perspective. But when you bring it to the real world, someone needs to pay the coders, someone needs to host the servers, someone needs to do this, someone needs to do that. And there must be a utility value, and there must be someone paying for all these resources being poured to create this crypto. So whenever I hear people say that blockchain is good, crypto is bad, I think the question I'll ask them is, right, who's paying for it? so I think I hope that I can tempt the users to think a little bit differently when people analyze, or when they get opinions that crypto is bad and blockchain is good. I think it all intermingles into one. That's why I feel that the person who invented Bitcoin, when he took a look at game theory, encryption, and all that, he already thought of all this. Because Ether on its own, without its high gas fee, how would they be able to get developers into the ecosystem, develop all this technology, develop the layer ones, develop the layer twos, or even I love it that Dato mentioned Skyscanner. So one day it's gonna be so prevalent that it's like, okay, today what's my exchange rate? So if I'm gonna go through a Skyscanner equivalent, okay, if I buy in Dubai, this is my Bitcoin price. If I buy in KL, this is my Bitcoin price. So I hope people get the nuance of not looking at it in isolation and from an academic perspective. Yeah,
that's a good point. Before we move on to maybe a short conclusion from Dato, I'd just like to add this. I thought about it that how best to explain all of this without getting too much into the weeds, because blockchain is so complicated, right? And crypto in general. So I just gave the example of, look, what is blockchain? Blockchain is just a really advanced way to account for things, right? It's an accounting system that cannot be reversed, cannot be tampered with. You can't put a gun to the auditor's head and say, hey, change these numbers, right? That's what blockchain really is. But let's use it, let's say, in a stock investing context, right? Saying, blockchain good, crypto bad. It's like saying, accounting good, but company X bad, right? Like Nestle, let's say, bad. It's the wrong way to look at it, because the blockchain only has value if there's data being fed into it, and this data should be telling you something about the ecosystem, which is what both of you alluded to with the network effects, with all the users and the utility. The blockchain is just there to record the good stuff. It's just there to tell you, is this good, is this bad, or is this medium? So that's how I would just add my 2 cents on this whole discussion, because really I think people who bring this up are barking up the wrong tree. And to be fair, I do not blame them, because the technical people, they come up and explain the beauty of crypto and blockchain has made it even more complicated. So I guess it's also our job to help organize the thinking, the right thinking about crypto. But you know, just as a closing before we move on to questions, Dato, how would you, you know, convince someone today? Maybe a bit on the fence, you know, like, okay, I can hear what you're saying, but you know, I'm still a little bit doubtful. What would you say to try and push him over the edge?
So it depends, right? Am I talking to my friend or one of my parents or uncles or aunties, right? I find that with my friends, it does help to explain what blockchain is. With the slightly older generation, not to make them sound like like totally kind of lost in the woods or in the weeds in that sense, but they just want to know like whether it'll make money, you know. So I think the arguments are slightly different. We do understand that the majority of our audience in MX are actually of the former category, right? Which are they're younger, they like tech, you know, and it probably makes sense. Like they're you know, in relative terms, early adopters. So I think like MJ said, like what's blockchain, and I tend to use analogies that I believe that I hope most of the audience can already relate to, and that's an Excel sheet, right? Even Google Sheets is a bit of a stretch. Not everybody has used a Google Sheet, right? And what for me, like really, what's blockchain? It's a giant Excel sheet where every row is one entry, right? And like MJ said, you can't change it, you can't go back, and but you can reverse it. Like, you know, you could do +10 here and then later do -10, right? But you can't go and change the +10 or wipe it off. So the difference being that it's decentralized, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, are wondering, like, what does decentralized mean? Which is, to us, it essentially means like, you know, if I had the Excel sheet and I shared it with you guys, you know, you'd have my version of the Excel sheet, and if you change something, that doesn't mean that I would get the changes. But in the decentralized or blockchain kind of space, lots of people have the same copy of the same Excel sheet, and then somebody else in the network says, hey, here's a new entry. And then somebody in the network says, let me check if that's real, right? Or that's true, that the entry actually happened. And then they verify it, and then they tell everybody else, hey, you know, put this in the next row. And that's essentially what making a block is, right? In the blockchain. So actually, a lot of people are actually quite surprised. Oh, actually, is that what a block is? And yeah. The next bunch of data that they're saying, here's new entries, right? That you should add to this giant Excel sheet. And that's essentially what blockchain is and how blockchain grows. And yes, before we get into the kind of like intricacies, because a lot of people manage to spot, well, hey, if I control most of the network, I can change it, right? Or I can make sure that things don't go in, or I can put the -10s. I say, yeah, that's true. But for in the large networks, it's actually pretty difficult for you to own a majority of the assets. So that's what it kind of relies on. And then, you know, once they understand this concept of like what a blockchain is, which is essentially this decentralized Excel sheet, right, that everybody has, or everybody could host if you're a node. And then I typically don't even tell people what a node is. It just complicates things, right?
Yeah, for sure,
you
for
know?
sure.
But essentially, a lot of people in the network have the same Excel sheet. That is not cryptocurrency, right? That is just the information network. And in some networks, they make a token. They make something that allows things to happen in the way that things are registered on the blockchain and things are executed. And those tokens sometimes become what is called a cryptocurrency, right? Because on top of being used in the network, people then buy, sell, trade them, right? And I tend to find that once you explain it that way, people understand, oh, actually, a cryptocurrency is not the blockchain. It's an application or a use case of blockchain. And you can have a blockchain that doesn't have cryptocurrencies, but it becomes quite obvious to people like why you need a cryptocurrency to affect a lot of these networks. I think like typically a lot of the conversation, I always tell them, look, the magic in cryptocurrency is not the currency part, right? Like you can't take a broad brush and say all cryptocurrencies are cryptocurrencies, because actually they're all very different. You know, Bitcoin and Ethereum, like day and night, you know. So the magic is in the crypto part, and the fact that like it's built on this blockchain that nobody can really cheat, you know. But that doesn't mean that everything in the blockchain is true, like true in like kind of like the real world sense. It's true that it happened or that it was the data was entered, you know. But you could lie, and then the lie could be true because everybody just says that, okay, you said +10, and everybody says, yeah, you said it, but it doesn't mean that +10 really happened in the real world, right? So blockchain is not impermeable. It's not, a lot of people think that it cannot be hacked. I mean, there are ways, like almost any system made by humans
It can be exploited, definitely. It can be exploited.
can be exploited. They're not infallible, but it's very difficult. It's way more difficult than getting your PC password and opening an Excel file on your computer. So it's I do think it's a better alternative, and it's probably where things are moving towards. And I think to John's point, as companies become more and more, I think as the personnel in companies become more and more comfortable with the concept of a blockchain themselves and a cryptocurrency, that's when you'll see the likes of Mersk say, hey, this thing works, I've made money on it. I think it creates value. And I think we should track every single container, right? Because we don't want to manage this giant yard and like have the next 60 boxes disappear. We want to be able to find what it is. Hey, but you know what? One day, if that's going to happen, maybe blockchain is the solution. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a bunch of Apple AirTags. Who knows, right? Because then that might be easier to track. But I think one way, shape, or form, like things will evolve. And then for a lot of the applications, they are looking at something as decentralized and spread out and secure because it is spread out like a blockchain.
Great. Like I love that summary, and I think it encapsulates a big chunk of what we've described very, very well. Now we have to go on to the questions. We'll take a few questions, and the first one came in through Mr. Tan Chi Sian. Now, some context. When we share this webinar on our own channel, we are known to be in the very small community. We are known to be fans of the Luna cryptocurrency. And so, they're asking Dato, when is MX Global going to list Luna?
So we're looking at a bunch of other cryptos to kind of apply to the SE to list. As you know, in Malaysia right now, it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and Ripple, right?
Yes.
Some of the other three that we don't currently support, we do think that there's some promise in that, so we probably will apply to list those. But we'll be getting a lot of inquiries, especially from developers, for specific coins. And not to say that that's exclusively the way that we'll do it, but I hope that a lot of investors can bear in mind that when we apply to the SC, not everything is an Ethereum and Bitcoin, right? Because those are obvious. The SC looks like global trading volume. Wow, lots of people buy it. So enough people in Malaysia would want to buy it, right? For something like Luna or even Cardano or AVAX or Phantom, right? A lot of Malaysians are fans of it. And so we have to work with the data and be able to demonstrate to the SC that there's enough demand from the Malaysian market. Because as you rightly pointed out before, we operate where it's always to the ringgit fiat pair, which means that highly unlikely that somebody who doesn't have ringgit fiat is going to be using one of the DEXs. So right now, our approach is generally to work with the development community. Some guys are doing interesting things on, Luna. Some of them are doing things with Sand. Some of them are doing things with Matic, right, or Polygon. So we ask them, here, what are you guys going to do, and how is that going to, kind of like permeate throughout the community? And then we use that as a starting basis for what would be the forecasted or anticipated demand of that coin. But yes, long story short, we're going to look at like quite a few coins to list. One of the things that we're working on right now is like we want to find the easiest way possible for our users to just tell us, hey, here's the coins that I want, right? And that's probably not going to be like a form that says, please list out the names of the coins that you want. We're looking at and going to work very closely to the SC so that there's also no confusion to investors, because we don't want a situation where we put up 100 coin names and then investors start saying, oh, MX is supporting these 100 coins or for listing, right? But so we're trying to manage the narrative so that that these are the ones that we currently list, and these are ones that you can vote and say, I want it, right?
Right.
And when we can assess that demand, and probably work that in with other data that we collect, then we'll be looking at some coins. And so for Tan Chi Sian, Luna is on that list, right? Nice. Maybe that's going to be like, he's thinking,
that's all. That's all people want to.
That's all we need. Okay.
That's it, right? That's all LunaVax crowd, at least, Yeah. So I have to ask a follow-up question to this, and I'm not sure if you're at liberty to share, but of course, feel free to not share if it fits. What do you think, or how do you think Binance can help in this to facilitate maybe the speed up of the regulators adopting more of this coin?
So, okay, number one, it's like an open secret, right? That a lot of Malaysians use Binance, or have used Binance, right? I should be very careful with my words. They have used Binance in the past.
Yeah. In the past,
So,
okay, yes, in the past,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I'm sure nobody accessed the site after July.
Oh, nobody. Absolutely. Yeah.
But the point still remains that before July, there were lots of Malaysians who used something like Binance.
Yes.
And so there is data, right? Like, I'm not saying that I want specific data on user XYZ, but in aggregate, you can see what generally Malaysians have bought, where the demands have been, and you can assess the liquidity and demand that they came in from a Malaysian-based user or Malaysian-linked user base. So that's number one, right? So we're making an educated guess of the demand of other new coins based on what Malaysians have done on other platforms, including Binance. That's number one. Number two, there's obviously huge liquidity in their books. Like I think we said at the top of the hour, right? They're the biggest in the world, but there's no ringgit fiat support on Binance. Now, we're totally cognizant of the fact that the solution to this is not to allow a ringgit fiat on Binance. Like, they're not a recognized operator. But is there a strategy that we can do where we can bridge that so that it's safe for the investors? At the same time, we can tap on that liquidity and the volume that flows through Binance, right? So those are conversations that we're having right now. And the third is really that they've done some pretty amazing products. Buying Ether in itself is, yes, exciting. You're joining this new crypto revolution, but you want to be able to do something with it, right? And a lot of the products have been stress tested on a Binance, just because of the sheer reason that they're huge. They're like the biggest in the world. So does that mean that all the products or features of Binance should be done in a Malaysian regulated context? No, but we are confident that quite a few of these features can be localized to work within a Malaysian context and be safe for investors. Now, I think that's the key, right? We're going to make sure it's safe for investors. It doesn't guarantee you'll make money. There's obviously still going to be market volatility. The product and the feature will be safe, but it does not mean that your portfolio will always be net positive. Like, there's still risk in investment.
Right,
and I think investors have to differentiate the two, right? Like, we won't scam you, but you should do DYOR, right? As they say in crypto, do your own research of what you want to buy. Yeah.
Yes, NFA. Yeah. So, for those of you all listening, actually, we're going to go a lot deeper into this about how the risk and the regulation and how actually MX Global will be mitigating a lot of this in later webinars down the month. But before I move on to the next question, I have to ask, right? Of course, you can't share with us what MX Global is working with SE and the kind of coins that you guys love to see listed. But on a personal basis, just on yourself, right? What is your wish list for coins to be on MX Global? Do you have a personal? Let's call it top 5.
So this is not investment advice, right?
Of course, 100%.
It's not investment advice, and generally my investment thesis or the way that I look at coins is not to do with the price action. Like I said, I'm more of like a long-term holder. Like my life before MX was basically venture capital and like investing in startups, like tech companies. So I'm looking really more at that element, and so I'm a big fan of, yes, of course, Ethereum, because what's ETH 2.0 going to look like? I think that's a huge inflection point that's going to happen in the scene. Personally, I feel that the things that AVAX are trying to do are also really, really interesting problems to solve. The Cosmos ecosystem, also very interesting, and actually, what's it called now? Yeah, Cardano, right? So ADA, yes, there's a slow start, but the way that they're trying to solve that problem is like, it's kind of the thing where, like, if they manage to do it one time, they're so entrenched, right? So as you know, they're trying to blockchain or tokenize education in one African country. And then I think if they manage to do that for education, they'll do it for transportation. Then they'll do it for property, right? And yes, of course, it cannot be as fast as like kind of like the next Ethereum decentralized app, right? But if they're able to do that, it's transformational. And then I think countries being countries where decisions cannot be like, like policymakers don't think that hard. They're not scientists, They do want things that have worked somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think the long-term bet for something like Cardano, if they're able to solve those problems and demonstrate that it works, huge upside. And of course, the last one is like, I think the metaverse will be a huge thing, right? Primarily because my 9-year-old just keeps wanting to go to the metaverse. So I think one of these metaverse protocols is going to just explode. I don't know which one,
Yep.
I'm still trying to get an Oculus, right, for my son. And then like I don't like, let's go and try this. Let's go and visit the metaverse because to be honest, I've seen it obviously in videos, but beyond a few proprietary projects, like I haven't. The Fortnite concerts are the closest thing I've been to in terms of a metaverse, right? But yeah, I think metaverse is going to be a huge thing,
Pro tip: if you're gonna get your kid on a Oculus or any VR sets, make sure they don't eat too much before playing the set.
Oh, because it gets very they get very dizzy and right, I didn't know that.
Yes, it disorients the. I've not used Oculus. I've used the one with Steam. I can't remember what it's called.
Okay.
The Steam gaming app. It's actually very well designed and all that, but it actually creates some sort of nausea. But it all depends on the human being, I guess. So okay,
actually the easiest way to test for that is that if the kid can play a first shooter game without getting dizzy, most likely he or she can survive the thing. Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, that's the easiest way.
Okay, so Kudoshi Tan asks, any resource or tips for beginners to get into the development side of blockchain? I have no opinions of this, but maybe John or Dato, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, maybe John, you want to try to go first?
Yeah, I think any object-oriented programming language will help. But I think, from what I understand, Rust is a very prime programming language that a lot of these guys are looking for. I think any good basic degree in computer science, logical-based thinking, I think it's really just someone opening the door for you. Because even if you understand the language, I think it's really just solving problems with your with looking at how do I call it? It's really solving problems with using the systematic thinking that you have when you develop during programming. Because from my days as an engineer, we had to code machine level and also some high level, but it's always the systems concept that could help lah. So, resources or tips, I think the YouTube, there are tons. I think you can even do a whole Python course, 4 hours on YouTube for free. Yeah, but what I do know right now is really Rust, R-U-S-T. So Dato, over to you.
I agree, John. Right. So Rust is is a great framework to kind of start off with. If you look at DApps or decentralized apps, I might be wrong, but I think the peak was like something like 2018. Like there's a DApp mushrooming, around every corner, right? It's kind of slowed down, which I believe for somebody like Kudoshi who might be starting out, it might be a good thing because team sizes are bigger. A lot of these guys do congregate on a Twitter or a Discord. And I think beyond kind of like the resources of reading and going through the walkthroughs or of how to build a D app, you should join some of these communities. Just get to know some of the developers and then see like the kind of problems and things that they're talking about. And that I think naturally will lead you to other resources which are specific for those kind of projects. So it depends. I'm not sure what Kudoshi is interested in, but I think if it's stuff around NFTs, smart contracts, or like sometimes you might be interested in building, like an application, like a wallet, or like I met this amazing team that's building something around custody, right? So I think you need to have some time, right, Kudoshi, like to kind of like just suss out what people are working on, what you find interesting, and then hanging out with them online, and then kind of reading like what they would recommend, right? Rather than kind of like, it's very different than like Web 2.0 or even Web 1.0 kind of development, because the stacks were fairly, similar, right?
Yeah.
You could learn one thing. Yes, Python is different from Ruby, for example, but a lot of some of the underlying fundamentals are similar. Whereas in crypto and decentralized applications, is very deep, right? Super deep. So maybe don't jump in to the deep end just yet. Try to find like what you think is cool for you to work on, and then network within those circles. And people in crypto and decentralized application development are super friendly, man. I mean, like,
That's right.
That's true.
and they want to be in the Twitter spaces,
Yeah.
right? And the threads, right? So that's a huge advantage from an industry standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think reading the white papers will actually help also, Dato. I don't know if you agree, because the
Yeah.
white papers will actually tell you the concepts they're trying to solve, and they will tell you the basis of why they use this programming language or whatsoever. And I think I just want to iterate a point, Johan O, our friend. Portfolio and proof of skill are more important than certification. To Joshua's question of, are certifications actually important, which is very related to the earlier question about how to get started. It's really, have you done a project that works, rather than, oh, I have this bunch of certificates but you can't even program an application, you see. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I would just only add that, look, I think one thing unique about crypto is that there are, and one thing that's not talked about enough are the builders, right? Because I think so much is about money making and whether Bitcoin is going to hit all-time highs or whatnot. But I think the building side of things, you mentioned Cosmos just now, Dato, there's a joke, right, in the crypto community. If you're in Cosmos, you're in it for the tech, right? Because it doesn't really,
Yeah.
you don't really do it's not as exciting, let's say, as an Ethereum or Luna or an AVAX. But there is one question about MX Global, which is, will MX have staking or futures trading?
Yeah, so both of them are things that we're looking at, right? So as you'll see, like we've already started putting out feelers to kind of hit hunt for people who have worked on these kind of products before, right? On every angle: marketing, business development, programming, right? Obviously, with programming, we have a huge partner in Binance, where the tech in itself, we're basically going to use some of their stack and just switch everything off, right? Because we can't, like, most of them cannot be done in the regulated space. And then when it can be done and we've localized it, we'll switch it on. So yes, I think staking and futures trading are definitely things which we are assessing right now. I hope that your viewers can understand that the inherent risk profile of either is very different. Staking is a lot more passive, right? Not to say it's guaranteed, but like fairly low risk in that sense, right? Futures trading is more complicated. I would say, right? Like you'll see the likes of FTX grow exponentially over the last couple of years, but at the same time, it's kind of like what's happening in Forex, which is a lot of people are relying more on signals and not really DYOR, right? They're not doing their own research. So a lot of people get money like wiped out from the balance sheet on futures, and we're cognizant of that. Obviously, we're not trying to assume that that's what's going to happen in the Malaysian market, but there are risks that we have to assess. And yeah, I guess the short answer is we're assessing both, but we'll probably come up with a convincing argument for staking rather than futures sooner.
Yeah.
So staking probably sooner than futures.
Yeah. I think that's a sensible approach, because futures has a very speculative element to things.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
have you guys? Do you guys know anybody who's lost a lot of money in futures?
all the time.
Or you've heard of?
All the time.
So have you seen their faces? Like when they So I had this very close friend, very proud of, like, kind of the net positive growth of his portfolio. One wrong bet the wrong way, all of his profits for the last 2 years gone. And I told him, hey, you should be happy. Like, at least you still got your capital. You didn't lose everything, right? But just losing their profit, like you can see it physically manifests on them. So I think the idea of doing well in futures is very romantic and very cool for investors, but the risk is very real, right? And people people don't handle it well. I would say,
Right.
yeah. So we have to be cognizant of that.
Okay, I think thanks so much, Dato, for answering the questions. We just take one last one, right? And it's gonna be by Jeff, and he basically, I'll just paraphrase or read the whole question, right? What do you think the Malaysian government can do more to increase crypto adoption? Jeff feels like we are a little bit behind, so maybe maybe we go with John.
Yeah, I think maybe Jeff, the first answer is like, let's not rely on the government, right? So I used to work in MDEC, and one of the reasons I joined MDEC was because I didn't expect quite a lot of the government, right? I was thinking, hey, we're putting so much weight here, and you guys are so slow, you're not doing much. When I was in there, then I realized, well, government's a huge machinery, and not everything is as important to them as it is to us, because there's so many issues that always come up, right? And you can imagine, right? Like, if the capital markets are crashing, no matter how passionate somebody in the regulator is about crypto, that their focus for the short term has to be in kind of correcting that part of our capital markets going out of sync. It's just the national problem kind of like outweighs their personal interests. So the grass is always greener on the other side. You can always look at Indonesia or Thailand or somewhere else and say, hey, that's it looks pretty good over there. But the truth is, like, every market has their own inherent problems.
That's true.
And the good thing about the SE's approach is that they're not prescriptive down to how you do it, right? It's a very principle-based approach in terms of like how they deal with us and tell us. They don't tell us, this is how you should do custody. They tell us this is what you should achieve with custody, and these are the risks that you have to address. And it's up to us to kind of address that. And that's why we're fairly confident that new products, new coins, maybe even like, new pairs, right? Maybe even doing beyond a ringgit pair, everything trading to a ringgit pair.
Nice.
It's possible, but it's not going to be possible if you just sit in your thumbs and wait for the SE and Bank Negara to say, hey guys, I think you should turn it around, right? No. Yeah. So I think we're in a good state right now, that the regulators are open to it. And for those of you who may have been following that, right? Bank Negara announced that their CBDC experiment may be targeting the retail use case of CBDCs towards 2023. Now I know like people are going to say, whoa, that's like almost 2 years away, right? Or like, but in the grand scheme of things, 2 years is not very long. And I'm sure there can be lots of things to keep you occupied for 2 years until we see this ringgit CBDC potentially. In the meantime, there are lots of other interesting products that we can look at. But things will happen and things will shift. Maybe one last point to Jeff is you don't need all of the ecosystems to exist here for it to be for it to be exciting, right? That's why we're relying a lot on the developer community. Like, we want to know what developers are building in Malaysia, because inherently they would want to target like a Malaysian audience. So there are some coins that I'm a bit disappointed, like, the developer community in Malaysia is not so keen on, but fine, I think it starts with that. The developers advocate, and then people start using it, and we really want to just like kind of support local community and industry so that they can succeed, and then guys like us who are like maybe retail investors can get on some of these projects knowing that it's being used here, right? And it just makes it much more real. Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap it up, John, do you have any thing to add?
I think Dato covered it really well. The only thing maybe I just highlight is that rather than waiting for government, design the right incentive structures around those businesses, around those crypto, people will come. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Right. You that's where the money is, that's where the honey is, and people are incentivized correctly and educated correctly. That's where people will come, and that's where talent will shine.
That's true. Cannot rely on the government. It's really up to us, right? Kita jaga kita in that sense. So I guess that's a wrap. Sorry for those who we cannot answer.
You can ask them to ask us in the next session. We're going to conduct this a series for a preface for those audience listening today. This isn't the first and the last. I hope, Dato, you enjoyed yourself throughout this session.
So fun, guys. Super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I look forward to. I believe we're doing 2 more of these, right?
Yeah,
At
so
least
just to
3
update
more.
everybody, the
Yeah.
next 2 more will be one. We'll talk about Bitcoin, Ethereum. We'll go deep, and then the next one we'll talk about the risk and how MX Global is going to address that for Malaysians. And who knows, if these series becomes more popular, that's when the third and fourth and fifth might come along. But certainly for now, it's been a great session. I look forward to the next ones. And I'm actually not sure how to end this. Do we pass it back to Liren?
Yeah, Liren.
Yeah.
Hi guys, thank you so much for the session today. It was really a lot of good knowledge I learned today actually. Yeah. So guys, I'll see you guys maybe on the next session. And,
yes, 100%.
All right. And have a good evening. Thank you guys for viewing the show and see you guys next one. All right.
See you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good evening.
Dato.